I'm going to add an additional logging interface, and this interface is going to be called an SMS log. Now, the goal of this log is to send text messages. Fairly obvious stuff, except that this particular log is going to be a bit different. So let's implement this. So I'm going to put it here, and it's going to be a class called SMS log, which is going to implement the iLog interface, or in the terminology of AutoFac, it's going to provide the iLog service. I'm going to implement the missing members, only one member here, but I'm going to do something different now. I'm going to add an argument which needs to be provided in the constructor, because when you're talking about text messages, you need to know the number to which to send the actual text message. Now, we already did it previously in the example of the email here, but for the email, I just provided a fixed value. And now we're going to have a configurable kind of setup. So here I'm going to have string phone number, and I'm going to do ctor-f to actually make a constructor for this phone number. Okay, so when it comes to actually doing the logging via SMS, we're going to do console.writeLine. I'm not really going to send a text message, but we're going to emulate the whole process. So I'm going to say SMS to, and then the phone number, and then the message itself. Okay, so the message should obviously be in curly braces as well. Let's put it in curly braces like so. Okay, so we're good with the SMS log. Now, the problem with the SMS log is you have to provide an argument to the constructor. And there is no way that we're going to be registering a default value for a string, because that's just silly. Instead, what we need to do is we need to somehow provide the argument in this builder.register something or other call. So how do we do it? Well, actually, there are different ways in which this can be done. So the first way is called a named parameter. Named parameter. So the idea of the named parameter is that you essentially specify both the name of the argument you're trying to assign as well as the actual value. So here's how it goes. You still do builder.register type, and here the type is obviously SMS log. So you do all of this, and we may as well implement it as an iLog, like so. But then something interesting happens. We say with parameter. And here we specify the parameter by name. So we can essentially say phone number and the actual number, whatever that happens to be. So this essentially configures the container to provide an SMS log initialized with this particular phone number anytime when somebody asks for an iLog. So the name parameter is one of the many options. Let me show you some of the others. So I'm going to comment this out first of all, and let's do the second type, which is a typed parameter. So the name parameter uses a string. It uses the string phone number to actually find a parameter with this name. Obviously, if it doesn't find it, you're in trouble, but if it does, then everything is okay. Next up, we're going to try and find the parameter by type instead of by name. So the idea here is very similar to what we have here. In fact, I'm going to just copy this and uncomment this particular chunk of code, and then we'll continue from here. So we register SMS log as an iLog with parameter, but this time round, we make a new typed parameter. So you see in the previous example, we just had with parameter and then the arguments. Here we use a class called type parameter, and here I'm saying that I'm looking for a parameter of type string. So we provide the type of the argument and then the actual value once again. So this is option number 2. And once again, you can guess what's happening here. So when you register the type, the system goes off looking for a parameter which is of type string, and once it finds that parameter, it assigns it the value +1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there is a third option, which is probably the most complicated option of them all. So let me comment this out, and let's take a look at the final option. And this is called resolved parameter. So the resolved parameter is a very clever kind of idea. So we still do the same thing as before. Let me once again uncomment this part of code. So here's my register type call, and then you once again do with parameter. But this time round, you use something called a resolved parameter. So new resolved parameter. All right. So the resolved parameter is reasonably complicated. That's why I'm doing line breaks all over the place. Okay, so the result parameter takes two arguments. The first parameter is a predicate. Now this predicate needs to be satisfied by the parameter in order to assign a particular value. Now there are two arguments to the lambda function that you have to provide for checking the predicate. The first parameter is a property info, which is part of the reflection API. And the second parameter is the iComponent context, CTX. So these two parameters are passed into a lambda, and the first lambda, which is the predicate, let me actually put a comment here, so this is the predicate, it checks whether this combination of arguments is actually sufficient for this parameter to be assigned a value. So what we're looking for in terms of assigning the actual mobile phone number to send the text message is we're looking for an argument which is of type string and whose name is phone number. So the way you can express it is as follows. You can say pi dot parameter type is equal to type of string and parameter info dot name is equal to phone number. So this is the predicate. So essentially it's a lambda which returns a Boolean value indicating whether this property info and the context actually satisfy what we're looking for. So if this predicate succeeds, then you have another lambda function for the actual value accessor. So the value accessor is the thing which actually lets you specify what the value is. So the arguments here are once again pi and ctx, and here you can return the actual value. So in this case, it would be very simple, but you could make a value which is a byproduct of the property info, or the parameter info rather, as well as the iComponent context, which means that in this place, you can, for example, use the component context to resolve something. So this is how you define a resolved parameter when registering your type. So let's actually use this. So I'm going to actually instantiate a component. So I say var container equals builder.build as before, and then I say var log equals container.resolve ilog as before, and then I'll just say log.write test message. Let's see what this gives us. And as you can see, we get SMS to the phone number that we specified, and then the test message, just as we wanted. So all of the above examples are actually done at the registration time. So when you register the type, you also specify these parameters, but it's actually possible to delay the assignment of the argument that's being passed into the constructor until resolution time, as opposed to registration time. So the way this can be done is using the lambda expressions, which we've seen already. So let me comment this out, and we'll jump back to something that we've seen before. So if I use a lambda expression, I can do the following. For example, let me use a random number. So I'll say random equals new random. And now I can assign each of the resolved logs a random phone number. So I can say builder.register. And here in the register call, what I can do is I can provide a function. You can see it here in the signature listing. I can provide a function which takes an iComponent context and an IEnumerable of parameters, and it returns something or other. It returns an instance of the component. So here I can say c comma p, and this goes to, and we can provide a new SMS log. So a new SMS log, and here I can provide the constructor explicitly. Now what I can do is I can, for example, take p, which is an IEnumerable of parameters, and out of this IEnumerable of parameters, I can look for a named parameter by using the named extension method. It is of type string, and its name is phone number. Let's put a semicolon here. Now I need to explain what's going on. So what I'm essentially declaring is I'm declaring a constructor on SMS log, and I'm specifying a name for this constructor to be phone number. So I'm saying that in the parameters, when we go to actually resolve the whole thing, we're going to need to explicitly provide an argument named phone number. So instead of doing everything at registration time, I'm saying please do everything at resolution time. So now what I can do is I can insert a few debugging messages for us to see when this all actually happens. So I'm going to say here that I'm about to build the container. And here I say var container equals builder.build as before. And then of course, what I can do is I can try resolving ilog once again. Container resolve ilog. But this time round, I can't get away with just having no arguments here. Because what I've done in this particular line is I've registered the SMS log in such a way that it takes an argument, which is of type string, and it's called phone number. So here I have to provide a named parameter called phone number, and then I can provide a particular number. So in this case, I can use the random number generator, random.next, for example. And this is what we have, except it has to be a string, obviously. All right, so let's see if we can run this. Okay, so it seems like we forgot something. And what we forgot is, once again, we forgot to specify that this is also registered as an ilog. There we go. Okay, try again. And you can see we're about to build a container. And then, of course, let's add the code for log.write. Once again, testing the log. So log.write, testing. And we get SMS to some random value testing. Now, if I run it again, you can see that I'm getting an entirely different number here. So anytime when you go and resolve an ilog to get a new SMS log, you are specifying a named parameter whose actual value is taken from the random number generator.